My husband at that time had um, forced himself on me, for a lack of a better way to explain it. I did not consent to that moment. And I knew I was going to be pregnant. I remember calling my mom saying, I know I'm going to be pregnant. This is what happened. I remember calling adoption agencies, like trying to figure out how I was going to deal with this pregnancy. But I just had no answers. Nothing that I had resolved to do was sitting right with me. And all I could think of is just not being here anymore. I wanted to unalive myself. Today is going to be one of those unscripted days because I tried so many times to figure out a way to share this aspect of my story without a lot of fluff and without a whole lot of stuff. And I just couldn't figure it out. So I just decided that I'm just going to share my story as it pertains to me overcoming thoughts of unaliving myself, just so that I can help people to understand. Like, you can see where I am today, but you really have to understand that when I say I've gone through a lot, I really have gone through a lot. And one leg of that journey was back in 1995, early part of 1995. I was pregnant with my third child. And I remember just feeling overwhelmed and feeling like I just could not do it anymore. I was my third child, as I said before, I was pregnant with him. And I was in hiding. I had left their father, who was very violent, very abusive towards me. So I had left that domestic violence situation. However, in doing so, I also left my job. It was a very good job, very lucrative position. I left that. I left my home. I left my belongings. When I left that environment, I only had my children and the things that I could carry out of there. I was in hiding because their father had always told me that if you leave, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to find you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill our children in front of you, and then I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill myself. So when I left, I had to protect my kids, and I was really fearful of him fulfilling that plan. I later learned that it was just a threat, but in that moment it was very real to me, and I didn't have any reason not to believe him because he was always so very violent and abusive towards me. And so this specific day, I remember locking myself in the bedroom. My younger two children, they were 3 and 1.5 at that time. I don't know why the math is escaping me right now. Yeah, 3 and 1.5, because it was the early part of the year. They had not turned 4 and 2. So I remember just sitting in that window. We were up on the third floor of this apartment building. We were in the back of the apartment building, and I could see down. My belly was, it was protruding. I had a big baby bump in. I just remember sitting in that window on that cold day, just wanting to die. Now, I had already thought about, because I was carrying a child. Let me back up a little bit. I was carrying a child that I had not planned for. My husband at that time had forced himself on me, for a lack of a better way to explain it. I did not consent to that moment. We had a birth control practice that he did not adhere to, and I knew I was going to be pregnant. I remember calling my mom saying, I know I'm going to be pregnant. This is what happened. I just know this is going to end in a child being pregnant with a child. And it happened. I ended up finding out that I was pregnant. And so I remember calling adoption agencies, like trying to figure out how I was going to deal with this pregnancy. But I just had no answers. Nothing that I had resolved to do was sitting right with me. And all I could think of is just not being here anymore. I wanted to unalive myself. I had no money. I had just everything. I had lost everything pretty much in that moment. And I remember sitting in that window, and I was leaning, like all I could think of is just like falling out of this window, tumbling out of this window. I remember the tears just coming down. I was so cold, but I just didn't want to be here anymore. I was tired of living. I was sad. I was anxious. I just had all these things going on with me in that moment. But before I could make an action, before I could actually go through with what I was thinking, I heard a quiet voice say, "You can do this. You are going to do this and you are going to be okay." Something along those lines. And I remember just sitting there like, wait, what was that? Like, what was that? And the only thing I could think of is that that was God. That had to be God speaking to me and saying that I was going to be okay. And what I did not realize in that moment, that had I gone through with that desire and had given it all up and just given up on my life in that moment, I would not have experienced all of the victories that came after that. I would have not experienced the beauty of my life that followed that moment. And so I remember climbing out of that window and just like falling on my knees and bawling. I just cried. And I was just asking God to like, please help me. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how I was going to make it with these babies relying on me. And I just remember it coming back to my mind, this program that I had found in the stairwell of the building that I was sitting in about this church that was literally right down the street from where I was. And I chuckled because I remember in that program for that church, it says, "Please do not move during the service. We don't want you chewing gum. We don't want you making a lot of movements and sound as not to disrupt the flow of the Holy Spirit." I remember reading that. And when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what is this place? I will never go there. And guess what? That's exactly where I ended up. It was at Greater Mount Calvary Holy Church, 610 Rhode Island Avenue in Washington, D.C. That very next Sunday, or maybe a Sunday after that, I went there by myself. I left my kids with their godmother. I went to that church and I remember sitting in the back because I had to follow the leading that I was hearing and what I was feeling. And I remember Bishop Owens had preached a sermon that day and it was called "It's Report Card Time." And as an honor student, the majority of my life, I remember sitting there just getting an F on every subject that he had mentioned. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I am failing at this thing. I can't remember what he called it. And if I could get back that sermon, like I would probably cry just listening to it all over again. But I remembered going up to that altar. I still see the outfit I had on. My belly was protruding. And I remember going up to that altar and surrendering my life to Jesus Christ on that day. And my life has never looked the same since that moment. And as I was previously mentioning, had I given in to that desire to unalive myself, and I know I have to say it that way because that's what YouTube requires at this point, but I remember, now that I look back, if I had given up on that moment, I would have not experienced the healing and the level of healing that I experienced after that moment, being healed from PTSD, depression, anxiety. I would have not gone back to school after 17 years of being out of high school. I would have never gone to college after 17 years of being out of high school. I would have not have graduated with 3 degrees and possibly 4 if the Lord works that out. I would have not experienced that. I would have not experienced the birth of my other 3 children that came after that, my other 3 beautiful children. I have 6 beautiful children today, 3 beautiful grandchildren. I did not know I would have experienced that. I would not have experienced becoming a therapist and now participating in the healing of other people who felt the way that I felt, who have gone through or are going through what I have been through. I would have not married the man of my dreams, the man that was only a figment of my imagination, because up until my marriage, I had never really experienced a covering. I'd never experienced a man protection. I'd never experienced a man that loves me or loving me unconditionally up until my current relationship and my current marriage. Men had only used me, and I was only a fraction of the person that I am today. I would not have experienced applying and being approved to be a CEO of my own company. On that day, I had no idea the plans that God had for my life. I had no idea that there was such greatness in store for me. I had no idea. And so I'm here to share with you today to not give up. And I want to encourage you and to let you know that there is victory after this moment. If you don't quit, if you don't give in to those voices that are telling you that your life is not worth living, there is victory after this. I want to encourage you, and I want you to be encouraged by my life. And I'm going to say to you, the very thing that I heard that very cold day back in 1995, that you can do this. You can make it. Just trust the God that created you. Just trust the God that has the plan for you. Don't take my word for it, take His. I want to encourage you today. Don't give up. Your life is worth living, and we need you in this land of the living. We need your story. So I want to encourage you today that just as God has changed my name on so many levels, I talked about that in the last video, He will change yours also. He will rewrite your story. He will restore to you what the locusts and the cankerworm devoured. He will restore you. Just don't give up. Okay? This is Tia J, your healing expert. Why am I an expert? Because I've been healed. And I know what it feels like to be unhealed, to be broken, to be desperate for answers. So, this is Tia J, your healing expert, signing out for now and encouraging you to not give up. I love you, and I'll see you soon. Bye.